I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
Being enabled to forgive somebody who causes an offense
Does
towards
it really matter whether someone is Protestant or Catholic?
The genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
It is time once again to get credible answers to your curious questions. Oh, wait, I just stole Bobby Conway's tagline. I'm sorry.
Watch
That's
it
what
now,
you
bro.
guys... Oh, man. Copyright infringement there. I am so sorry. Welcome to the Pastor's Perspective program. We are here once again to answer your questions with some good answers. So, didn't want to use those two words because then I'd get in trouble.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California is here, as is, as you just heard, the one-minute apologist, Bobby Conway. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bri.
What's going on?
Good to see you, Bobby.
Good to see you too, Brian.
The great doctor.
What color? You know, I'm colorblind, and I'm looking at your shirt going, is it green or brown?
It's blue.
He rejects being put in the false dilemma. S or R, neither.
That's right.
It's green.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's kind of a sort of a it's not bright green. It's kind of like a green. Like if you look out at these pine trees out here outside our window, it's kind of a similar green to that.
Pine green.
I always feel like I wear this shirt and these sort of brownish pants. I do feel a bit like a tree.
You're camouflaged.
Yeah, and my wife takes note of this. She says, "What are you doing? You trying to look like a tree today?"
You look like a tree. Are you wearing that green shirt because you want something green to look at? Minus, we just don't have a lot of greenery to look at here in California right now. It's all brown.
I just realized that I just wear the same 4 shirts all the time. So I thought, I'm going to mix it up today. I just need a different shirt because I'm going to go on the radio. It's going to be, a live video, and people are going to go, "Why is Pastor Brian wearing the same shirt that he wore last week?"
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to break that up.
Well, that's good.
That's another thing we need to do on Thursdays when we record the second hour. We need to do a costume change in between. Otherwise, it looks like we're wearing the same thing on Monday that we did on Thursday.
Yeah. Now, do you guys, one of the things that my pet peeves is I'm wearing these pants, and I noticed when I was driving up to the station that something green or yellow got on them. And I'm working it out, and I have this problem with getting new clothes and staining them within the first few wears. It really bothers me. Do you guys have a hard time staining your clothes, or is do I have just a real gift of what's your spiritual gift? Staining my new outfit.
Yeah. I do have that same gift.
You do?
And I always stain it with the same thing, oil.
Oil. Oh, man, yeah. Your host.
Which is the thing that you don't want to stain your clothes with because unless you have, what is it? We've got the one thing that takes the stain out, but you got to spray it on there. You got to make sure. Is it shout? Yeah.
Shout.
I think it's shout.
Get it all out. These are the stains I can do without.
Hey, there you go.
Come on.
Wow.
You like that?
I've never seen the commercial. That's good. Is it shout? Yeah, it must be shout.
There's another one that, what's the other one called?
Yeah, I think the other one is the one I use. Cause shout is not.
It comes in a spray bottle. It's blue.
Mm-hmm. Well, my spray bottle's orange.
Orange.
Is that shout?
Tide?
No, I think
shout it out.
Orange might be bounce. I don't know.
Something. Well, anyway, yes, I do know that, and I, like I said, I always do it, and I always do it sort of toward the end of my meal. It's like I'm doing really good. Like Cheryl would tell me, change your shirt before you eat. Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I don't need to change it. You're going to spill something on it. No, I'm not going to spill anything on it. Sure enough, by the end of the meal, I look down and there it is.
It's like
inadvertently, unknowingly
stained yourself. It's kind of like throwing a no-hitter and then walking 3 guys in the 9th and then giving up a grand slam, right? Just blowing it.
And then for your last pitch, you throw it over the backstop.
Oh, come on now, touche.
He had to go there.
I love that story. I can see it in my mind. I replay it every now and again.
Yes,
when I'm
it's
just
traumatizing.
I want something to giggle about. I just think of Bobby throwing the pitch over the backstop.
At age 21. Oh, dear.
All right. They do make these things called bibs that maybe we should invest in. That way when we eat, the oil or the guacamole, that's always what I spill on my shirt.
It's hard. You know what? You want to know what would be good humor for me is just start picturing Pastor Brian in a bib. That's pretty funny.
It's not that hard to picture. We can arrange for that.
All right, 888-564-6173 is our phone number if you've got questions for us today on Pastor's Perspective. Here's one sent in on Facebook. That is another way you can send in your question, but can't really dialogue with you when you do it that way in case we have follow-up questions or whatever. But here is the question. My stepdaughter came to visit her dad. She was telling my husband that I belong to a cult because of the Christian links I'm posting on Facebook. My husband is a non-believer. She posts Mormon sayings. The horrible things they both said about me left me heartbroken. Husband agreed with her on all accounts. He knows I know about the conversation. Whenever she comes over, it's nonstop gossip. I cannot talk to her because she gets very irate. I know I'm supposed to love, but I just don't feel it. Any suggestions?
This is about her daughter?
Her stepdaughter.
Her stepdaughter.
Yeah, so she's a Christian woman married to a non-believer, and her stepdaughter, her husband's daughter, is possibly a Mormon.
Well, that's difficult. That's obviously challenging, and yet these are the kinds of situations where we really need God's help to love with a love that we don't have ourselves. And that's what we do have access to as believers, as God's people. He can give us love that we don't naturally possess. And I would say that it's just a time where you pray yourself up when you know she's going to come over, and you really just ask the Lord to help you. You don't have to answer her accusations or get involved in arguments about things with her. It's better that you probably not do that at all and just try to be just as pleasant and kind as you can, and it's not easy. It's not like I'm saying it's real simple. It's not easy, but it's something that we have to pray about. We have to depend on the Lord. You know how it is when you give advice and you hear of a situation, you might think, oh gosh, why did they act like that? And I went in somewhere this morning to get some coffee, and it's one of these places where you're kind of not sure what the protocol is. Some people are wearing a mask. Some people behind the counter are wearing a mask. Some people in line are wearing a mask. People are sitting over there drinking their coffee, obviously not wearing a mask. So, I walk up. I just get out of my car. I got my mask in my hand. Haven't really put it on yet. I kind of walk up, and I'm literally 10 feet from the guy, and I'm just kind of asking a few questions. All of a sudden, he stops and goes, "Sir, put on your mask." And I'm just like, okay, I'm supposed to act really loving right now and not be annoyed by this. So I just put on my mask and left it at that. But I mean, I didn't totally shock myself, but I was a little shocked about how annoyed I was by that statement.
I'm annoyed just hearing it, so. And I'm not shocked.
So, I'm telling this lady just to pray and love and be kind, but I am admitting that there will be challenges to that kind of a situation. So, but this is where we do have God's help. And I kind of thought it through in the few minutes I was waiting for my coffee, and then I was like, I never said anything rude or anything, but just in my heart, I was like,
just sinning. I mean, just filthy, rotten sinner.
That was it. was resenting this comment. So speaking of masks, Cheryl and I were out for a walk yesterday, and we go on this great walk in this. I mean, this is like as wide open a space as you could ever get. You're on the ocean. You're out in the middle of. There's nobody there except the few people walking on the trail, and you're walking along, and a couple are coming toward you, and they've got their mask down around their neck, not on over their face, and then they get about 10 feet from you, and then they put their mask on.
Yeah,
and you're just like, what does this mean? We have
you diseased,
nothing but fresh air,
individual
all around us. Nobody's coughing. Nobody's doing anything. And I just, all of that to say, I think I was telling somebody earlier, there's still a lot of fear in the culture about COVID. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the people that were walking by me were fragile or sickly or anything like that. They appear to be perfectly healthy people. Yeah. And then, but man, and then, they pull the mask up, they pass you, and then 3 feet later, they pull it back down again. And you're just like, okay.
Now, you know what doesn't make sense to me, though? Like, we went out for some sushi the other night. My daughter's been on the East Coast, so we took our son, and we go out for some sushi. And the guy's wearing a glove on his left hand, and he's building our sushi and other sushi. I mean, he's like grabbing squid and stuff with his right hand, but there's no glove. So you're behind there with the mask on, and you're literally just like pinching little pieces of carcass to throw it on top of our rice with your bare hands. And that was frustrating. So I didn't say anything. My family held me back, but I did want to kind of say, like, this doesn't make sense. You're sitting here, you got a glove, build it with the glove hand, not with the non-glove hand. And so I was so annoyed. And sushi is one of those things, like the little meat pieces are so small that I really want to see, like, use some tweezers or use a glove, but don't roll my meat between your fingers and then put it on top of rice, because then I don't want to eat there anymore.
The moral of the story is don't eat sushi.
Yeah, I guess so. Or eat it with. But is that disturbing?
That is disturbing.
I mean, right? Like, we're in the middle of COVID, in the middle of a pandemic, and you got your mask on. We're all socially distancing, and you're rolling meat between your fingers to put it on top of my rice.
But of course, he did wash his hands 20 seconds before he did that.
He probably did, yes.
But somebody else was, because I've had this conversation with somebody else today already. But you think of just these odd things where the way everything is. So you walk into a restaurant and you got to have your mask on. And then they seat you, and then you take your mask off, and everybody has their mask off. They're all talking. And it's like there is no rhyme or reason to any of this stuff. That's the point that.
But if you get up from your seat,
yes,
you've got to put the mask on.
Yeah. So I had to walk to the restroom with my mask on, passing everybody not wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. And it's like,
you were in the COVID safe zone, though.
I guess so.
And now Gavin Newsom with some of his new lovely Christmas gathering laws for us.
The Christmas gifts
for the state
gifts,
of California. Yeah. Like, just sing beneath your normal talking voice.
Oh, Lord, help us.
Yeah.
You're a mean one. Never mind. I'm not going to go there. All right, 888-564-6173 is our phone number on this fine Tuesday afternoon, and we'd love to hear from you. 888-564-6173. We'll start with Fino in Murrieta. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Fino.
Hi. How are you guys?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just ducky.
Ducky?
Yes.
We take that as good.
That's a good
Ducky
thing.
is good.
Yes, it is.
Good.
Very good.
All right.
Can you answer his question like that, Bob?
That'd be tough.
Yeah. Well, my question is that I have a situation at the church that I attend to where they are saying that a person that is living with somebody, they're not married, it's okay for them to serve in the children's ministry or a nursery or even greeting. So I asked them, well, that person's living in a sexual sin, so would it be okay for a gay or lesbian to serve in those areas? And they said yes. And they said that I was being too legalistic, and I'm like, well, thought the Bible was pretty clear on that, but maybe I'm being legalistic, but I don't think so. So I was just trying to get you guys' opinion on it.
Okay. What do you guys think, Bobby?
I mean, just given the way that you've laid it out to me, that would obviously, seem like a concern. But wanting to give, the pastor the benefit of the doubt, of, hey, if I was to sit down and ask some follow-up questions or what have you, I don't, different pastors take different approaches as it relates to people serving. There's different levels of service in the church as well. So some people might be okay with, let's just call it a non-believer serving in a church in a greeter position versus a worship position. People are going to have different positions on some of that stuff. As it relates to a believer living with another person, and if they are sexually active, you've got a couple problems happening right there. So I think that hopefully that could be just dealt with. I think that if the pastor is saying it's okay for people to sleep together outside of marriage, that's a problem. And if you're living together, that's going to create a greater temptation. So I don't know the pastor. I don't know where he's thinking on that. And so I would want to be cautious that I don't overly come down on something where I don't know maybe what led to his conclusion on that. Like, how do we know that they're sleeping together? But even if they're not sleeping together, it's not wise to live together. Are there any particular situations where you could imagine people living together that are believers, where you kind of help them adjust out of that situation or to get married? Well, let's say you had two people, they were non-believers and they went to a Harvest Crusade event. They both get saved. They've been living together for 5 years and now they're new believers and they're living together. Well, you want them to get married then, right? Or move out, because that's a very tempting situation. All that to say, I'm rambling a little bit, but there's just it's hard for us to answer definitively without knowing more of the context. But if you are a man and a woman sleeping together outside of marriage, the Bible's really clear on that that's a sin.
Anything to add, Brian?
What do you think, Vino?
Well, this particular couple have lived together for quite a while. The pastor knows that also. So, but I'm just surprised that it would be that. I guess a church would take a stance that it would be okay for that, or even a gay or lesbian to be serving. Because for me, what you let in the physical, you now are starting to let in the spiritual, and that's definitely a sexual sin. So if it's okay for sexual sin to be serving in the children's ministry, even to me, just seems like that's not biblical. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I think if it is indeed sexual sin, which just taking it on face value, it sounds like it is. Then I think that the pastor is swinging the pendulum too far to the other side. But like Bobby said, there are different philosophies of ministry where people will welcome, unbelievers even into certain levels of service in order to, there's kind of this idea of people need to belong before they believe. So here's an opportunity for them to connect with this community, to see it firsthand, to experience it, and then in the process, like, wow, I believe this. I want to receive Jesus. So there are people who operate on that philosophy. Mark Driscoll when he was up in Seattle with Mars Hill Church, they sort of operated on that, for a long period of time, where they would just have a bunch of, crazy kids up there that were wild, but then they'd bring them in and they just give them something to do in the church, and then through a process of time, they would come to the Lord. Hillsong in New York City did a similar thing where they had a choir. And they invited anybody to join the choir. And there was a big situation that developed because there was a gay couple in the choir, two guys that were together and they were part of the choir. And then, so, Hillsong was sort of labeled as accepting same-sex relationships and so forth. And yet that really wasn't their position. They just They opened up the choir as sort of a means to reach out to the community. They knew people who weren't even believers would come and want to be part of a choir because people like to do that. That's going to expose them to the gospel, and then hopefully they're going to get saved. But that's a philosophy that I think it's risky in some ways, because I think in the Hillsong incident, for example, to me that was just. There inevitably there's going to be a moment where there was going to have to be a decision that would be made. You're setting yourself up to have to really make a call, because the gay couple that were in the choir, they had another motivation for being in the choir, because they felt like they were already Christians, and their motivation was to be there to help Hillsong become an affirming church. Yeah. That was their motivation. Yeah. Hillsong's motivation was to help them realize that, you need to have a biblical understanding of, sexuality and marriage and so forth. So you got two conflicting views. At some point, there's going to be a collision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really what
that's where you have to really communicate where you stand with people. Like, we would allow people to serve, like set up teardown if you were a non-believer, like something like that. We wouldn't want, like, obviously the Bible has clear, outline for like elders and, stuff like that. So we ended up having somebody, though, that was playing guitar on the worship team as a non-believer, and that made me uncomfortable. I didn't oversee putting all that together. Our worship pastor did. But lo and behold, this person ends up getting saved and starts writing some of the greatest Christian music in our church. Wow. And so it was the worship pastor's thought, like, he's not leading us out in worship. He's just kind of creating some strings for us to play along. Yeah. And his hope was that he would experience the presence and power of God and the love of God. And he ended up, and that's what happened. Yeah. So I totally understand how some churches would be like, no way. But I go, here's a story where I'm telling you, I was the lead pastor in church, and I was uncomfortable that we had a non-believer playing the strings. But then I look back and I go, well, it's cool that God used it for good. Now, that doesn't mean that the decision was necessarily right any more than the person who got married to the non-believer and the non-believer got saved. It's just God works in spite of us.
And then, Redeemer Presbyterian in New York City, where Tim Keller was a pastor, every week their band was a bunch of professional musicians who, some of them were saved and some of them weren't.
I didn't know that.
And the philosophy was, these guys are going to come and they're going to play and they're going to hear the gospel. So.
And a lot of them probably did.
But I think a key, like you said, is what are they doing? And obviously they can't serve in any capacity that requires spiritual discernment, that requires understanding of God's word or communicating God's word. I mean, an unbeliever just can't do that, right? But set up and tear down. Yeah. Why not? Somebody comes along and did they just want to help?
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. Let's see. Are you a Christian yet?
Yeah.
Sorry, no, you can't. You can't set up that chair.
Like turn the tables. Let's say you and I were going to a mosque.
Yeah.
And we're non-believers, and that's the place we go. And they said, "Oh, sure, you can help us set up and tear down. That's no problem."
Yeah.
But if they were to tell you, "No, you can't help us set up and tear down because you're not a Muslim," right? You could see like, "Well, I'm just wanting to help out here."
Yeah.
But if they were to say, "You can't be an imam without being a Muslim," well, that would make perfect sense, right? Yeah. So
we might be over answering.
Yeah, we question. Might be.
But we keep getting off on these tangents today. But
yes. Well, here's one more. Fino says that this pastor knows that this couple has been living together for a very long time. So why doesn't the pastor just offer to, hey, let's do a wedding, a quick marriage?
Well, I would ask that same question.
Yeah.
And I would ask this pastor, what are you doing? I mean, because if he's known him and if they've been there for a long time, if you're going to have a policy where you're going to allow people to serve to some extent, even though they're not believers, well, I think your objective really ought to be that they come to faith. But if they're there for years and nothing's happened and they're still living together, it's like you're kind of failing in your goal here.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Fino, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Jackie in San Clemente. You're on Pastor's Perspective. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well.
I have a question. I had an incident where I didn't feel that I was being rude or upsetting. Okay, basically, I was new at a church, and the cliquey women ousted me, and then I signed my daughters up and was quickly concerned that they would kind of go through the same thing. And would you like to explain the situation, please?
So, we signed up for the Bible study, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we went, and we were everyone's laughing and stuff because they were saying jokes. And I excused myself to go to the restroom. And I was walking down the stairs, and the wife of the pastor came behind me, and she was like, "Can you come up here?" And I was like, "Oh, I was on my way down to the restroom, but sure." And she was like, I don't know, it was very confusing because she was talking to me, and she asked if someone was crying. And of course, no one was crying. So I said, no one is crying. And she's like, well, I just want to see if someone was crying, and I came out here to talk to you. I was like, oh, okay. What would you want to talk to me about? And she's like, I think, do you want to be here? And I was like, what do you mean by do I want to be here? She's like, because if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. And I think she was like, I don't think you want to be here if you don't want to be here. And I was like, who said I didn't want to be here? And she's like, have you accepted Jesus in your heart? I'm like, yeah, of course I accepted Jesus in my heart. And she's like, then why aren't you looking at me when I talk to you? I'm like, oh, you're just kind of making me uncomfortable. And she's like, you're very disrespectful, aren't you? I'm like,
wait, so this is the pastor's wife telling you this?
Yeah, the pastor's wife was telling me this, and I was like, oh, no, you're just making me uncomfortable. And she's like, you're very disrespectful. You should, and she was like, can I pray for you? And I was like, sure, but I don't see why you would want to pray for me. And she was asking for my name and stuff. And when she went to pray for me, she gripped my shoulder, unusually, hard, not usual when people pray for you. And I was like, it kind of made me unsure. I didn't really think anything about it.
Okay, so.
But of course, it was a little bit yeah.
Now, was this a youth group that you were part of? Is that?
Yes, it was. And they, at the end, she said that we shouldn't come back because I was very disrespectful and that we were being disruptive. But everyone else in the class was doing the same exact thing. And she only came to talk to us. And she said that we shouldn't come back because I was disrespectful to her towards her prayer or something. And I didn't even do anything. Or I just said, oh, yeah, sure. And I just said that she made me uncomfortable. And she took it the wrong way.
Okay, so back to your mom. Jackie.
Yeah, and she actually narrowed in on her and came. So she said she was going to the bathroom, and she said, "Excuse me, can I talk to you? Where are you going?" And my daughter said, "Oh, I was just going to the bathroom." And she said, "Can I talk to you?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she goes, "I was just going to go to the bathroom." And she's like, "Well, can you show some respect and talk to me?" And she's like. And then she was standing there, and she said that she wouldn't even let her walk anymore.
Yeah. So, Jackie, here's my question to you. Was this after you had the situation where you were sort of shunned by the clique, like you mentioned? Is this after that? Is it that they knew that she was your daughter, and so maybe they, just kind of zeroed in on her because of that? Is that what's going on?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. And I even said I was afraid that was going to happen. I said my daughters have really a lot of anxiety about being a part of a new group. So I really I was literally begging them, we've been through a custody battle. We've been through a lot. Please just don't hurt don't, and they did exactly that.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate, all of that. And of course, I mean, these things do happen. The best thing to say is just, find a church where that's not the atmosphere, and thank God that that's not the way all churches are. Some are, and but I would just say that church, that's not the place for you guys as a family, and look for a church that welcomes you and a church that's not. I mean, these things are realities in churches, right? Cliques develop, these things happen, people gravitate toward their group, and somebody from the outside comes in and they're sort of ignored or shunned. These are just the realities of church life. But In some places, it's more pronounced and more problematic than others. So find a different church.
Yeah. Time to take a break. We'll be back on Pastor's Perspective.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Thanks so much for listening to the Pastor's Perspective program. Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California is here. So is author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Right before the break, we were speaking with Jackie, and she and her daughter had a horrible experience at a church, and we are very sorry that happened. On behalf of the body of Christ, I mean, that's just one of those things that, and it sounds like Jackie and her daughter do know the Lord, so they know that not all churches are like this, but it's still an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, obviously, churches have different dynamics and different emphasis in that, but the thing about the church, the real distinguishing mark of the church is to be love, right? And so you want to find a church where you sense that. There's an atmosphere of love, you feel loved, you feel welcomed. And these two things go hand in hand, love and truth. So people are going to speak the truth in love. And but that kind of, just the way that was all described is just, that is a place that you want to just say, well, that's not the church for us,
That can be such a painful situation to be in a church where there is a lack of love like that. I know when I had my relapse, experiencing some of this pain firsthand on a leadership level, it was hard because we started a church, we tried to create a high grace culture, yet recognizing some truth. But I can just remember sharing the relapse with the staff and two of the pastors, wondering, have I ever forever disqualified myself from the ministry? So here I just announced that. And the first thing that they can respond with for a guy that went 23 years almost without a drink is, have I forever disqualified myself from the ministry? A pastor's or an elder's wife. And I was like, I am sorry that this happened. I was just going through a tough time, doesn't make it right. I didn't want to go and have the relapse that I did. God used it for good, and I repented and asked him to, to help me to grow through it. But I was broken up about that, and an alcoholic does not control the amount that they take in. Well, and, I thought, well, maybe I could control this after 23 years. I haven't had a sip. And never mind all these leaders that would say this, most of these people drink in a moderate way. But the elder's wife says, you need to leave my house right now. You're not sorry enough. And I just remember going...
Wait, God said that? Was that God who said that?
Yeah, well, no, God, the Lord. But that was the pain of it. And I go, I get that. You had a relapse. I just think if somebody came to me on staff and said I had a relapse after almost 23 years, it'd be like, hey, well, let's explore what happened there. What was going on? That's not a healthy thing. I get it, but how can we help you? Where are you at? You probably feel a lot of shame right now if you went that long without a drink. You probably could use a hug as well. But the church is often a shaming center instead of a healing center. And that's what's so tragic.
Yeah. And that you don't want to be that.
No.
I mean, that is not the place. You think of Jesus and Peter. Here's Peter. He denies that he even knows Jesus.
Yeah.
He swears with an oath, I don't know this man, 3 times. And what does Jesus do? He gives him an opportunity to reaffirm his love.
Yeah.
Simon, do you love me?
Yeah.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah.
I love you. And so, I mean that it's almost like a cancel culture that is
absolutely in the church.
It's preceded the current cancel culture. It's preceded it because it's been in the church for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you cross a line and you're canceled.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's why I ultimately resigned from my post. I would have, I had some people saying, we want you to stick around and stuff, but I ultimately resigned because I was like, this is a cancel feeling culture here.
Yeah.
And I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
I don't, and that's a hard spot when we get that way. And hey, I'm one that totally gets restoration, or we need to get repentance. I mean, I know for me, I stood up before the body and said, look, this is what happened. The body at large was unbelievable. The love, the warmth. It's unfortunately sometimes these leaders and sometimes
the clique.
And sometimes too, it's crazy. Like they'll have one of the guys that would be like, hey, have you permanently disqualified yourself from ministry? It's funny because they'll go and look right in the Bible at what the Bible has to say about drinking, but this person could be so blind to his own arrogance. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And that's the thing where we can pick and choose the areas. And I'm so thankful that we serve a Savior that loves us and welcomes us. I love the story of the prodigal son. I mean, I feel like a prodigal. I feel like if God doesn't hold me by His grace, I'll slip up again today. I mean, I am walking by His absolute grace.
Yeah, and remember, it's the prodigal sons, plural, because really, the other one is got a big of a problem as the one that left, but he doesn't recognize it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a part of the story that's been missed for a long time. You go with the prodigal son. I mean, it says it all. But what about the guy that
exactly?
Yeah, that the self-righteousness, the lack of concern or real care for his brother. The works righteousness, I've always done everything right. My brother's messed up. This is the classic, The Prodigal God, Tim Keller's book. He does it on that. And he just blew the lid off of so many people's take on things. Yeah.
Well, I look at the church, and I think the church is filled with older brothers from the prodigal story. And I think that the damage that those people do in the church, they'll look down at the prodigals and think the prodigals are ruining the church. The prodigals are, well, I go, the prodigals can actually be really forgiving and gracious and merciful and create a gospel culture. It's the elder brothers that don't allow for a gospel culture, and they're so blinded to their own sin. They're maverick-like. They're overly black and white. They're self-righteous, and they'll always feel like their decision was right. Yeah. The sense of self-rightness is I think it really draws people away from the church.
Yeah, indeed. CalvaryChapel.com. Use the Church Finder feature to find a church near you. You can type in your city, your zip code, and they'll show up. And none of these churches have any cliques. we've checked, right? No, I'm kidding. There's no perfect church, but, you know.
Yeah, and you know that, I mean, the clicky thing, that's something you really have to fight against that, because it develops easily. And I mean, quite honestly, when I first came to this church, 40 years ago, I walked in as a stranger, and back in those days, there were quite a few cliques, and I remember thinking like, wow, this is kind of trippy. There's this group and that group, and I didn't fit into any of them, but I persevered, and God dealt with all of that stuff. But it's just a reality. I mean, it's not like one person's worse than the other, and that's why they do that. It's just a tendency that develops that you have to fight against it.
Yep.
Well, I think the stuff we're talking about is important. We're trying to weed out legalism, and it doesn't serve the church well when we see it. And it sounds like this person bumped into it. I think the church, can really do a hard look, and we all should be asking ourselves, are we a legalistic church? Are we a legalistic person? Because that's problematic, because the legalist just tends to look at the totally down and out sinners. But the reality is Jesus was constantly hanging out with messy people, and the Gospels for messy people, and legalists don't like a mess. They like a predictable, packaged, overly black and white box to live in, and they'll shame the crud out of people who don't fit in it. And we need to repent from that too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the problem, like you alluded to, Bobby, is that it's kind of a categorizing of sins, or sort of a grading of sins, where, like you said, I mean, here's somebody who's just got a ton of arrogance, and through that arrogance, they're judging you for the fact that, you sinned in regard to the alcohol. But for them, it's like, well, you're the sinner, not me. I'm fine. Because for whatever reason, arrogance doesn't fit in their categories of sin.
No.
But it's right at the top of the list in God's categories of sin, right?
Yeah, sure is.
It's like pride is kind of like the top one, and yet it's so often completely overlooked. Like, wow. I mean, this is the human condition.
All right, 888-564-6173. Pastor's Perspective is what you're listening to. I'm Brian Perez in the studio with Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Let's go to Ontario. Here is Samuel. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Samuel.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Paul? Yeah, good. I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
All right.
Good.
Yeah, my question was, what is your guys' perspective on like Christian rap music, stuff like that? I'm asking because before I got saved, I used to like listening to rap music, and I don't listen to it anymore, but I'm trying to start listening to more of like Christian rap music. So I just wanted to get your guys' perspective on that.
Here's MC Brian B. to let you know what he thinks.
Brian B.
Samuel,
there's some... You say that because the person that I like listening to a lot, his name is Brian, and his ministry is called Kingdom Music, and his name is Brian too. So
is that right? What's
their YouTube channel is called Kingdom Music.
Okay, interesting.
And they spell it with a Z.
Brian Trejo.
Yeah, there you go, Brian Trejo.
Cool. Well, I mean, rap obviously is it's a style of music, and some people like rap and some people don't like rap. And I kind of am in the middle. I like good rap. Lecrae's one of my favorite guys in the world, and he's probably the most well-known Christian rap artist. I have a friend named Thizzle, and he's a great rapper as well, and I love his stuff. And locally, Propaganda is a friend of ours, and he's a great rap artist as well. And so, again, music style obviously is more of a preference, but thank God that there are guys who are gifted and able to put these words together and put these beats together, and through it express the gospel. I think that's great. So. Yeah, there's good stuff out there. And if that's your thing, then find the good stuff.
Now, Samuel, did somebody tell you that you shouldn't listen to Christian rap? Samuel, are you there?
Rapping. Yeah. Do you guys hear me?
Now we can. Did somebody tell you shouldn't listen to it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the church I go to, because I like rapping. I like writing freestyles and stuff like that.
Cool.
And before I had gotten saved, I was trying to leave listening to worldly rap, like rap they just mentioned about stuff like sex, money, and drugs. Mm-hmm. So after I got saved, a lot of my friends from church were like, oh, you got to stop listening to any sort of rap because it's not of God. And they kind of discouraged me. And I went for more than 7 months just trying to listen just nothing but strictly worship music, just instrumentals. And they kind of discouraged me, and that's why I was like, well, I wanted to get your guys' perspective, because I always thought, it's a good way, to share the gospel with other people that necessarily don't like worship music exactly, or other types of music, and their style is more of rap music.
Yeah.
So I just always thought that God would approve of it if you're doing it to glorify His name.
Yep, you're right. That's what we think too.
Yeah. And is this another example of a overly legalistic church that's saying, no, you can't listen to that, any kind, even if it's got a Christian name in front of it?
One of the dangers I feel like that's happened is this is a lot of post-Reformation. You had the Gutenberg printing press. One of the securities before the Reformation, it was replete with problems, obviously. The church needed reform. But there was a clear line of thinking on things. And I'm not saying that line of thinking was healthy. I think the church needed reform. But now everybody is their own authority, and we have all of these different interpretations out there. And at times it's just a mess, right? And because you're just having to clean stuff up and clean up these interpretations, and everybody talking about what you can do and what you can't do. And so much of this misses this idea that we each have an individual conscience, where it might be that somebody isn't supposed to listen to rap maybe at the front end. They could have been so into a particular culture, they get saved, and just the whole sound could trigger that person and remind that person of something. Okay, I could understand if somebody was to say that, but at the end of the day, if it's Christian lyrics, that can be a great thing. I remember showing up at a conference that I was doing with my wife for a week for a small group of about 50 people. And there were some high-profile families, we were told, right before we were about to lead this week retreat. And it just so happened that Lecrae and Tadashi were there, and we got to invest in them for an entire week with them and about 20 other couples. And wow, what a great guy Lecrae was. He just won his Grammy. Tadashi was there. He did the Chainsaw song. And these guys really love the Lord. And they were just really, passionate about Him. And I'm so thankful that you have Lecrae and Tadashi that can reach people that are passionate about rap music. It's not my particular favorite style, but that's the danger. Mm-hmm. Just because it's not my favorite style doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to it. Yep. And isn't it funny? That's what we do a lot. I don't like that, so this is what you shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And that's how legalism gets born.
Yeah. And that's a thing with pastors too, because we have to be careful. Even, when it's something legitimate, maybe God, I learned this the hard way over the years, God would be dealing with me about something maybe and speaking to me about, not doing whatever. And then I would think, okay, I got to get this message out to everybody. Everybody, God told me don't do that. And so therefore you guys can't do it either. And you have to be mature enough to recognize that, God might put limitations on you in things that aren't sinful, but those limitations don't extend to the guy next to you necessarily, because he doesn't have the same problem that you have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we have to learn to, we have to learn what is for us personally. And of course, everything in the scripture is for all of us. But then there are those things that we have to just say, well, this is my conviction, and I got to go with my conviction, but you don't have to share my conviction about it, because it kind of goes to the drinking thing, right? There are people who, they have a deep, deep conviction that, as a Christian, you should not take a sip of alcohol, period. That's their conviction. You live by that conviction. That's fine. But that's not everybody's conviction. Mm-hmm. And don't judge another Christian because they don't have the same conviction about that, because the Bible doesn't say that. So if you want to interpret the Bible to say that, You can try. You're going to have a hard time. But if that's your conviction, praise the Lord. Then you live by it. But don't tell me that I have to live by it.
And that's why I have 4 wives, because I feel like I'm just kidding.
Oh man.
Oh boy, yeah.
And I didn't say that.
Wouldn't that be the license part of it all?
I didn't say that because I'm going to go have a drink after the program.
Right.
All right. Let's go to San Diego. Here is Brandon with a question on painless childbirth. And all the ladies said, yes, sign me up. Brandon, welcome.
Epidural.
Hi, Pastor. How are you?
Good.
So we're expecting our second baby in January. And my wife recently read this book, and she wanted me to read it, see what I thought. And there was just a couple concerning things that I had read in there, 2, and I couldn't really get past them. There are a lot of good things about it, too, about it kind of opened my eyes to actually praying for an easier delivery for my wife, because our first baby was like a 26-hour long labor for her.
Oh, my goodness.
So she's a little fearful for this one, and we've decided to do a home birth. So we're kind of looking into more things to, some more naturalistic pain management things how medications are off the table.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2 concerning things in the book I read was one thing was that, which seemed kind of weird to me, kind of made my discernment meter go off the charts when the author had said, God will meet you at the level of faith that you have. Which I didn't really, kind of confused me, but at the same time seemed like bad theology.
Yep. Agreed.
Somewhat. And then another thing that I read was that Jesus redeemed us from sin, which I totally agree with. But in that same sentence, she went on to say that Jesus redeemed us from suffering and sickness on this earth. Mm-hmm. And I know plenty of prayerful people who suffer all day long. So I just want to do...
Yeah. So if the author of this book slammed her thumb with a hammer, it wouldn't hurt? Is that what she's saying? I don't know. Brian, what do you think?
Sheesh.
Well, Brandon, the 2 things you cited are obviously problematic. I mean, and they're just not true. So you're right. Your discernment meter is in perfect shape there, because those things are off the wall. They're out to lunch, and they're just not realities. I'll tell you a really quick funny story. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, there's a passage in Isaiah that said before she could labor, she brought forth a son. And we were like, there it is, man. That's it. No labor, and we're going to have a boy. She had 28 hours of labor, and we had a daughter.
Uh-oh.
And so we realized early on that you need to be careful how you selectively pull these passages out, But, Brendan, since you mentioned your wife had 26 hours, my wife had 28 hours with our first. I'll just tell you, our second child, she had like 8 hours and basically an hour of hard labor. And because we had 28 hours the first time, I was not taking her to the hospital. I'm like, you're going to be fine. We got so much time. Don't worry about it.
Oh, no, yeah.
I got to the hospital. The baby was crowning already. They're like, she's never let me live that one down. So, so just because she had 26 hours doesn't mean that she will this time. And my wife had a natural birth as well with 3 of our kids, and then our 4th child had to have a C-section. But my oldest daughter had both of her children natural, and the doctor, he said this about my daughter. He said, "This is the toughest woman I've ever met in my life." This guy had delivered like thousands of babies, and my youngest daughter had a baby 8 months ago, and she just looked at her mom and her sister. She said, "I'm getting an epidural. I don't care what you guys did. I'm not into the high pain thing."
Yeah.
And my wife and my daughter were both like, why didn't we do that again? Remind me, why did we go through all that pain? Because they watched my daughter Kelsey just basically have, she's like, I think the baby's coming right now. Oh, okay, I feel fine. So
I almost passed out when I saw how long that epidural needle was. That was just horrifying. That thing is long.
Oh, yeah.
So, Brandon, hope that answers your question. Thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Billy in Simi Valley with a question for Bobby. What is it, Billy?
Hey, guys. How you doing today? God bless you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Really love the show. Love you guys a lot and get a lot out of you. So, Bobby, thanks for being so, open all the time about your recovery and, even your relapse. I've been back about 15 months from a relapse on those pain pills. And I had, I gave up 18 years of being clean and then was out for 7 on these pain pills, living kind of a double life in secret. My wife has, many, many, many years clean and we're still together, thank God. And, but, I go to meetings, I go to a lot of meetings because, we're very involved in the NA program and they help me. I love them. I'm glad that support group is there for me. And I know you had experience with secular recovery and it's just weird when I go to meeting, I'm always worried about losing my testimony because it's, I kind of like when in Rome, I do as the Romans do,
Yeah. So, Bobby, what would you tell Billy? Because we're running out of time here.
Billy, I know we are running out of time, so sorry we weren't able to hear the rest of kind of maybe what your thoughts would be. It's hard to answer that. I think that when I was early on as a Christian, I was going to secular AA meetings. I had a sponsor tell me don't talk about Jesus in the meetings. That really bothered me. I quit going to the meetings for a while. I was totally plugged in to Celebrate Recovery, which I do think is a great alternative. Later on in my life, I was able to go back into secular meetings and realize, okay, I don't have to mention the name Jesus in there. I can kind of go in covertly and learn from people's experience, draw on their strength, and then look for opportunities to be a witness for Christ outside of those meetings where I could talk about my beliefs. And so we ended up starting an AA meeting at our church. People started coming like crazy, and that was a great thing. But they also knew that I was a pastor and I had a specific set of beliefs. So I do think find a Christian meeting, and when you go to AA Secular, go with a missional mindset and try to look for ways outside to talk about death, burial, and resurrection of Christ.
Yep, good stuff. Thanks for your listenership to the Pastor's Perspective program. We're out of time, but we'll be here tomorrow, 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. Phone lines open about 7 minutes before 3 o'clock, and we'd love to hear from you tomorrow. For Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Have a good evening. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.